public hearing for the code of conduct. If everyone's ready for that. First, I'll just thank everyone who participated on the code of conduct committee. Very helpful. You'll see as we go through the code of conduct today that there were many changes made to the code of conduct, but most of them are language changes as we had the Farrar firm do a legal kind of review of the code of conduct and make necessary changes to the language. Specifically, you'll see things like where it mentioned disabled students, and we had to change language so it indicated the more appropriate use of students with disabilities and so on. So if we look at, I'll have Joe kind of scroll through, just go to section 1, you'll see some language changes. These under student rights and responsibility, and these language changes were just made in accordance with the New York State law and board policy. Then you go through section 4, you'll see some definition language changes marked out in red. And if there's any questions, if anyone wants to stop me, I can review that with them. You'll see cyberbullying, discrimination, emotional harm, things like that, and some things removed that are no longer needed because there were other sections.
It looked like there were a lot taken out. They were probably repetitive.
Correct. Much of that was repetitive, and they just wanted to make sure that it was clean and kind of hit what it had to, so they weren't kind of contradicting each other as well. And then you can see on section 5, you'll see the stuff information about others in the school community. Again, some language changes there. And then page 10. Section 7, prohibited student conduct. There were some language changes there as well. Those are on page 13 and then 15 through 21. And if you look on, just want to make sure I'm on the right page here. One of the things we did as a committee that was recommended, if I can get to the right thing, you'll see some discussions about the AI, the artificial intelligence and stuff that's being used there when it comes to like ChatGPT and different systems that are out there that can write essays and things for students. That's kind of a big thing that's occurring right now, so we wanted to add some language into that part of the policy just to identify that, and that may be stuff that every year we got to look at as things kind of continue to grow in that area, because we don't want kids just using AI, but for everything, but there is a use for it in the classroom, so there was a lot of discussion around that and the importance of it, but also the importance of having our code of conduct. Moving on to section 8, again, some language changes. You see there, and again, I'm moving through pretty quick, so are there any questions with any of this? That I know Sam and Shelley were on the committee, but no one else was, so I want to make sure I can answer any questions that they come up. Where are we there? Section 8, other standards and expectations. Some minor changes there, language again. Section 9, penalties for the violations of the code, updates in there. And again, some of the language in there, just to kind of just point out, the additions we're talking about, the consideration of the student's age, nature of the offense, so it wasn't just a blanket penalty, it's taking nature, progressive discipline, also the age of the students. Section 10 for discipline procedures. If there's any question there. And then section 11, you'll see some stuff for appeals. That's on page 42. And that was just to kind of clean up some of the way that people feel. There's appeals for superintendent hearings, and then there's some rights for parents for short-term suspensions and things like that, and following a certain process. And you just remove some of that language, so it made it easier. Where are we, Joe? Section 12. materials, page 44 to 45. Same thing, job 13. Yep, section 13 for the reporting. Questions on any of that? A lot of this, again, just to, probably it was language changes that we had legal look at, update it, and make sure things are correct based on New York State law and any policies. And then section 15, see alternative education programs, again, it's just some language cleanup in there that I mentioned earlier. And then our appendix 12 and 13, you'll see some changes there. If you go to appendix A, this was one of the ones that was brought up by school, and some of it was really just, you know, talking about some of the different things that are no longer applicable or that are repeated in other areas. Appendix B, the same thing. Are there any questions or anything I could go back and review?
No.
So we'll have that, and I believe that'll be on our next board meeting for approval for the 5th. Okay.
Dave?
Yep.
I just have a quick comment or noticing. Thank you for the presentation. I was on the committee again.
Yep.
It's always, I learn something new every year. I just want to make a comment though. I know that we had, or you had brought in students to be involved on this committee. And I don't know, for whatever reason happened, they weren't present. I don't know if it was a scheduling conflict, but maybe when whoever's reaching out for students to be a part of this committee, that they understand the time commitment, because I think it's really important to have the students speak back, especially with a lot of the areas in code of conduct.
Yeah, I agree with you. And we've always had students on the committee, and we invited students for the committee this year, and for whatever reasons, I think it was due to other commitments and conflicts, so that they were unable to attend the meeting. So what we're going to try to do next year is try to figure out a way that we can get those students to be present there, or get people, you know, students who are going to commit to it to know that, you know, commitment, and reach out to them. One of the things I did, and I spoke about it in the meeting, was that because we couldn't get them to get to the meeting or get online for us because of other commitments, I always had the building principals talk with those students or survey students to get that information. And this year there wasn't a ton of stuff brought up from the students, but if you remember the previous year, there was a bunch of stuff, especially with dress code and things, that were at the forefront, and they were integral in helping support making some changes to code of conduct. So we do definitely want to include them, and we're going to try to make some more effort to, you know, as this year we saw that there wasn't a ton of participation, we'll try to make sure that we figure things out so that we can get them to participate.
I knew you guys would try to do that, so thank you.
Yep.
And the other thing is, in previous years, the athletic code of conduct was always a part of this school code of conduct, but it's not happening this year.
Yeah, so that was one of the recommendations from legal. The athletic code of conduct, it's not a requirement to hold a public hearing for the athletic code of conduct yearly and go through that process. We still want it to be part of our committee discussions, and if there are changes to it, we would bring them and just report on them, even though it's not necessary. So it's not going to be connected to this necessarily, but we will still have it in the same spot so people can readily find it and things. But just to create, you know, that separation of the two pieces. But if you recall, last year we did make some changes to ensure that, and that's why I want to keep you know, Chris Campolita on the committee, because we did make some changes last year, in previous years, to ensure that the athletic code of conduct was consistent with the other, you know, regular code of conduct, because we didn't want penalties for the athletic code of conduct to maybe be greater or, you know, different than what students would be, you know, disciplined for within the school day.
Thanks for clarification.
I'm sorry, I always forget that. I gotta close, so we can close the hearing unless there's any other questions. Thank you.
So
we can move on to the hearing, an open hearing in regards to the district-wide safety plan. So, pull that up and we'll go through the changes for this very similarly to what we just did. The first change that I'd like to point out is on the table of contents, there is now an appendix B for remote learning, and we'll look at that farther when we get through the document, but this is a required addition to the plan this year. If you recall, we've had a few different things that we've added over the years related to the pandemic, and I think the remote learning plan is probably another one that's a result of that. The other changes as we go through this are mainly about personnel on page 6 in regards to superintendent of schools and deputy superintendent language. So we have made that change based on the appointment of the superintendent, and we will continue to update those changes up until approval at our reorg meeting is when we bring this one back, I do believe. The next changes in appendix A. So really, we went through this with our committee, that we had a special subcommittee from our safety committee to review this with PTA membership and all of the people that the board approved to be a part of this, community members, administrators, teachers, and so forth. So a lot of this stays the same. If you remember, this is the one that is open on our website, so there's not confidential information in it. And I always try to mention during this public hearing that we then have the building level plans that are highly confidential in regards to maintaining safety for our students. So those are reviewed by the building principals annually as well. They're in the buildings, they're in the district office, they're shared with law enforcement. So if we continue through here, if we get to appendix A, again, there's further name changes, updates in regards to superintendent of schools again. We have a new food service director that we hired since last year, so those are some of the edits that you will see in that appendix A. I'll wait to, this is a big document. We are continuing to review this document in regards to duplications that are in the building level plans, because years ago there was only a district level plan, and then I want to say back in like 2012-13 timeframe-ish, we had to start having the building level plans in addition to the district. So we continue to look at this plan to see if there's things that are repetitive that we need to take a look at. Appendix A, so there's some more name changes that we just went by and read. Up at the top, appendix B, addition of suicide and crisis counseling number, that 988 number is a new number that we added this year. Appendix C, we deliberately leave that page blank. And then D is the updated superintendent numbers, student enrollment numbers, teacher numbers. Those are all things that we update on an annual basis. Appendix E has school daycare centers on it that we update every year as well to make sure that that is current information to the best of our knowledge when we are reviewing this. And again, there's more name changes in appendix G for updates with staff in regards to dispatchers that we have hired and or the food service director, again, and making sure those names are updated. We have removed all personal cell phone numbers from this document, just because it is on our website and for confidentiality of people. K has updates in it in regards to the people that meet the qualifications to be on this list for CPR first aid. And so we go through these every year as well and make sure that it is a current list for people to be able to reference. Change of food service, Utica National, those types of things that we're looking at. And then in appendix U as well. Is it, again, an area where we remove cell phone numbers? That is also part of our SPCC plan, which is our spill prevention plan. And those numbers will be posted at the pump, which is important for our community partners, and we will be sending those out on a regular basis to our community partners as well. If a spill is to occur, we want people to be able to contact people at that moment in time versus having those numbers again in this document that's on our website. Appendix V, this is the biggest change this year, as we mentioned. This is in regards to our remote learning plan. It's a template of a plan right now that just has some generic information in it. I do think there are a couple comments that I would appreciate people bringing up at this point, and we can kind of talk through that a little bit.
Yeah, I did have one question on bullet point 2. I just wanted to make sure we were open to pivot to other types of devices if the district chooses to do that. We were pretty specific in that bullet point.
So we're actually going to, based on this hearing, make a modification. So we have a public comment period, but we're gonna be looking to make a change, knowing that question came up, to, if I look at that second bullet, instead of being specific to iPad, what we're gonna say is every K through 12 student is provided with a mobile device. As we are a one-to-one district, teachers are encouraged to utilize these tools as much as possible so students are familiar with their use and function. And then similarly, we'll make an adjustment for the pre-K student, knowing that they don't utilize those devices, but in the event that they need to, our pre-K students do not currently use technology, but in the event of a remote period, we have enough spares to equip them with a mobile device if needed.
That sounds good, thank you.
So we appreciate those comments to give us that flexibility and that we're not running back to update this on a regular basis. So thank you very much for your input. That is the last change that we have. The SRO agreements, the SPRO agreements between the county and the village, we are working on those. As those get updated, we always add those to the plans as well. We typically don't have them this early, but once the board adopts those revisions for this year, we will then put those in the plan as well. Is there any other discussion, input, thoughts in regards to this portion of our document or any portion of the document we reviewed?
Just a comment with the SRO, SRPO agreements. The only really major change that you'll see was just the change in the contractual agreement based on salary adjustments for those individuals. Nothing substantial.
The only thing I noticed right off, you have people that are losing their CPR in June. Because before you print this, are they going to be recertified before you print?
Yes, either if they're not recertified, then we will take them off, but I do believe we have some things scheduled in the near future going into summer. So we will cross-reference those before we bring it back for actual approval.
Thanks, Dr. Davis. I had that also as a notation. I have a couple other things. Under Appendix Q for the safety committee, the members on the safety committee. Can you just clarify? I'm trying to get there, sorry. Like Cindy Cronin is listed, her role, her position is for parent Baptist and a parent. I wasn't sure that individuals could have multiple roles.
So we use the word district safety committee interchangeably, which is one of the things that we need to revisit and look at for next year. So we have a standing safety committee that meets on a quarterly basis, who reviews a number of things that is a district. And then we have the subcommittee, which the board adopted who those people were that was specified to us from the state to review our district plan. And then we have this document as well, which reflects, Rick, correct me if I'm wrong, this should reflect the people that we have on our standing safety committee? Yes. So I think that we can be better about communicating what we're using in the terminology to help. And I think that's one of the discussions when we start looking at board committees and those kinds of things like we were talking about in policy, that we need to revisit this topic as well.
Okay, thank you.
And we can strike that out. She doesn't need to be listed as a parent. It should just be listed as principal/Baptist.
And the other noticing that I had when I was trying to look up this afternoon in preparation to see who was required to be on these different committees, our policy 5632, which is our safety plan committee, we approved that as a board back in March, but it hasn't been moved over to active.
I will check that.
Yeah, it was policy 5632, and then also that meeting was 6460, which for some
Oh.
reason, so.
It's possible because all the 5,000s were listed under draft because they were being reviewed by the policy committee. So based on the policy committee's meeting today and knowing what we're moving forward at the June 5th meeting, everything that's listed as draft right now will go back to active until the next policy committee and board moves forward.
Okay, but we acted on this as a board, it was the first and second reading.
I'll double check.
Okay.
But I'm just saying, I know we may have done that, but then when we listed the 5,000 series again for review,
Oh,
it gets recategorized as being reviewed by policy committee and it pulls it offline.
Oh, okay.
So I think that's why,
Okay,
because we just did some of the 5,000 series today.
okay, yeah, if you can check, because if 6460
Yeah.
was also in that same time for reading and approval.
Yep, I will double check those.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anything else for our public hearing on our district-wide safety plan?
I just have one item, and then I'll close up. Just the Red Cross agreement, it's dated 2002. I think
Yes.
you may want to update that, because to make sure that things haven't changed and there should be a new articulation agreement.
We have attempted to, maybe that's a thing that we can have a discussion about, because we have gone back and forth even since I've been in district to try to get that updated, and to get them to give us a revised copy has not been productive to this point. So I appreciate pointing that out, and you may have some other ideas about how we can go about getting that updated. If there's no other comments, we can close this portion of our public hearing. Thank you very much for all the input.